The summer of 1898 arrived gently over the rugged valleys of Silver Creek, Montana Territory, where steam trains connected lonely frontier towns to a rapidly changing world. Every afternoon, the old railway station buzzed with ranchers collecting supplies, merchants unloading crates, and families waiting for loved ones returning from distant cities. On one warm June afternoon, the station master checked his polished pocket watch as the whistle of the westbound train echoed across the prairie. Thick clouds of white steam rolled over the tracks, while curious townspeople gathered to greet arriving passengers. Among those stepping carefully onto the wooden platform was a young woman dressed in a simple but elegant pale blue Victorian travel dress. She carried a worn brown leather suitcase in one hand and a carefully folded letter in the other. Her name was Clara Bennett, 23 years old, kind-hearted, courageous, and carrying every hope she had left in the world. Months earlier, Clara had answered a newspaper advertisement placed by a lonely rancher in Montana, seeking a wife who believed in faith, family, and honest work. Through months of heartfelt letters, she had come to believe she truly knew the man who signed every page as Thomas Walker. His words described wide-open fields, horses grazing beneath endless skies, peaceful evenings on the ranch porch, and dreams of building a family together. After losing both her parents and struggling to survive alone back east, Clara accepted his proposal. She sold nearly everything she owned, packed only a few treasured belongings, and traveled across the country, believing someone would be waiting with open arms when the train arrived. Passengers reunited with smiling relatives all around her. Children ran into waiting parents. Husbands embraced wives. Cowboys loaded supplies into wagons. One by one, the platform emptied. Clara stood quietly beside her suitcase, scanning every face. She smiled politely at each man who approached, hoping one of them might be Thomas. But no one stopped. No one called her name. Minutes turned into nearly an hour. The station grew quiet. The station master approached kindly. "Miss, is someone meeting you?" She smiled nervously. "Yes, I believe so." He looked around the empty platform. "I hope they're only delayed." Clara nodded, trying not to let fear show on her face. She unfolded Thomas's final letter once more. "I'll be waiting at Silver Creek Station. You'll recognize me by my black hat and brown horse. Welcome home." She read the words again and again, but the black hat never appeared. The brown horse never came. As the afternoon passed, whispers began spreading among the remaining townspeople. "That's the mail-order bride. Looks like her groom never showed. Poor girl." Clara lowered her eyes, embarrassed but determined not to cry. She had traveled over 1,000 miles with nothing left to return to. She couldn't believe this was how her new life would begin. Just then, the sound of hoofbeats echoed along the dusty road. A tall cowboy rode slowly toward the station on a magnificent black horse. He wore a weathered tan hat, a dark brown leather coat, a faded blue frontier shirt, and carried himself with quiet confidence. His name was Jacob Callahan, owner of one of the largest cattle ranches in the county, known throughout Montana for his honesty and generosity. Jacob had come to town to collect ranch supplies before returning home. As he dismounted, his attention was drawn not to the freight wagons or merchants, but to the young woman, sitting alone on a wooden bench, clutching a letter with trembling hands. He watched for a moment. There was something heartbreaking about the way she kept looking toward the tracks, as though refusing to give up hope. Jacob walked over slowly. Clara looked up quickly. "Yes, are you waiting for someone?" She forced a small smile. "I thought someone was waiting for me." Jacob noticed the travel suitcase, the folded letter, and the sadness she was trying so hard to hide. "You've come a long way." "I have. My name is Jacob Callahan. I'm Clara Bennett." He tipped his hat respectfully. "Would you mind telling me what happened?" Clara hesitated. Then, perhaps because she had no one else to tell, she handed him the letters Thomas had written over the past 6 months. Jacob read them carefully. His expression slowly changed. He recognized the name, Thomas Walker, a hardworking rancher who had lived only a few miles from Silver Creek. Jacob quietly folded the letters and returned them. "Miss Bennett, I'm afraid there's something you don't know." Her heart began racing. "What is it?" Jacob removed his hat. "Thomas Walker died 3 weeks ago. The words struck like lightning. Clara stared at him, unable to breathe. "No, I'm sorry. There must be some mistake." Jacob gently shook his head. "I attended his funeral." Tears immediately filled Clara's eyes. Everything she had dreamed about vanished in a single moment. The future she believed was waiting for her no longer existed. She looked down at the letter still clutched in her hands. "I have nowhere to go." Jacob remained silent for a moment. Then he quietly said the words that would change both of their lives forever. "You've been waiting for me." Clara looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I don't mean Thomas sent me today." He smiled gently. "I mean, sometimes life leads us somewhere different than we planned." She searched his face, unsure whether to trust a complete stranger. Jacob continued softly. "I won't leave you here alone. You don't even know me. I know enough." He looked toward the nearly empty station. No decent man walks away from someone who's been left with nowhere to turn. The station master stepped closer. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Callahan is one of the finest men in Montana. Jacob offered his hand. "My ranch has more empty rooms than people. You'll have a safe place to stay until we decide what comes next." Clara looked toward the endless prairie stretching beyond the station. She had no family, no money for another journey, no destination. After a long silence, she placed her hand in his. "Thank you." Jacob smiled warmly. "Come on." He lifted her suitcase onto his horse with ease. As they prepared to leave, neither of them noticed a well-dressed man watching from across the street. Beneath the porch of the hotel, the stranger narrowed his eyes. She survived the trip. He mounted his horse without another word and quietly rode away. Jacob and Clara began their journey towards Silver Creek Ranch, unaware that Thomas Walker's death was no accident, and that Clara's arrival had awakened secrets powerful men wanted buried forever. As the setting sun painted the Montana sky with soft shades of gold, Clara glanced once more at the railway station disappearing behind them. She had arrived expecting to meet the man she planned to marry. Instead, she had met the man who would change her life forever. The first rays of morning sunlight spread across the rolling hills surrounding Silver Creek Ranch, turning the dew-covered grass into a sea of sparkling gold. Clara Bennett stood on the wide wooden porch, holding a warm cup of coffee, as she watched dozens of cowboys saddle horses and prepare for another long day. The ranch was unlike anything she had imagined. Hundreds of cattle grazed peacefully behind sturdy split-rail fences. Ranch hands laughed as they loaded wagons, and the sound of horses echoed through the valley. Yet despite the beauty surrounding her, Clara's heart still carried the heavy pain of Thomas Walker's death and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Jacob Callahan stepped onto the porch, adjusting his weathered hat. "I hope you slept well." Clara offered a faint smile. "Better than I expected. You don't have to worry here. I've already worried enough for one lifetime." Jacob nodded, understanding more than she realized. "You'll always have a place until you decide what comes next." Over the following days, Clara refused to remain a guest. She helped prepare meals for the ranch hands, repaired torn clothing, organized supplies, and even surprised everyone by learning how to ride horseback across the open prairie. The ranch workers quickly accepted her as part of their family, admiring her kindness and determination. Old ranch cook Martha laughed one evening. "Miss Bennett has done more in 3 days than some folks manage in 3 years." Even Jacob couldn't hide his admiration. Every time he saw Clara encouraging exhausted workers or comforting frightened ranch horses during a thunderstorm, he realized she possessed a quiet strength few people ever noticed. But not everyone welcomed her arrival. Across town, wealthy businessman Victor Harlan sat inside his luxurious office, staring at an old newspaper clipping. "So she's alive. His assistant frowned. "Should we be worried?" Victor slowly folded the paper. "If Clara Bennett learns the truth, everything we've planned falls apart." That evening, Jacob rode into town to meet Sheriff Daniel Brooks. Inside the sheriff's office, the older lawman closed the door carefully. "I've been waiting for you." Jacob lowered his voice. "Did you find anything?" The sheriff placed a worn leather journal on the desk. It belonged to Thomas Walker. Jacob opened it carefully. Inside were pages filled with names, ranch accounts, and several letters. One unfinished page immediately caught his attention. "If anything happens to me before Clara arrives, someone must tell her the truth." Victor Harlan has been threatening me for months because I refuse to sell my land. The writing ended abruptly. Jacob's expression hardened. This wasn't an accident. The sheriff sighed. I've believed that from the beginning. Back at Silver Creek Ranch, Clara wandered into the old ranch library while searching for sewing supplies. Hidden behind several dusty books, she discovered a small wooden box. Curious, she gently opened it. Inside rested another letter. The handwriting matched Thomas Walker's. Her hands trembled. Dear Clara, if you are reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. Before she could continue reading, footsteps echoed behind her. Jacob entered the room. Seeing the letter in her hands, he immediately understood. You found it. Clara looked at him. You knew this was here. I hoped you'd never have to read it. She slowly unfolded the page. Thomas explained that Victor Harlan had repeatedly tried to force him into selling his ranch. After months of refusing, Thomas feared someone was following him. He wrote that if anything happened before Clara arrived, she should trust only Jacob Callahan and Sheriff Brooks. Tears filled Clara's eyes. He knew. Jacob nodded quietly. He was trying to protect you. At that very moment, outside the ranch, several horsemen watched from the hills. Victor Harlan lowered his spyglass. She's reading the letter. One outlaw adjusted his rifle. What now? Victor smiled coldly. We take the papers. Tonight. Darkness settled across the valley. Most ranch hands had gone to sleep. Only the distant sound of horses and the soft crackling of lanterns disturbed the silence. Suddenly, a dog barked, then another. Jacob's eyes opened instantly. Outside came the unmistakable sound of galloping horses. Wake everyone, he shouted. Gunfire exploded through the quiet night. Windows shattered. Bullets slammed into the ranch house. Clara screamed as Jacob pulled her safely behind a thick stone fireplace. Stay down. 8 masked riders surrounded the ranch. Their leader shouted, Bring us the Walker papers. Jacob recognized the voice immediately. Victor Harlan. Jacob grabbed his Winchester rifle and carefully looked through the broken window. You'll never get them. Another volley of gunfire answered him. Ranch hands rushed from nearby bunkhouses, taking cover behind wagons and fences. The peaceful ranch transformed into a battlefield. Smoke drifted across the moonlit yard as horses reared and frightened. Cattle scattered into the fields. Inside the house, Clara clutched Thomas's letter tightly. She suddenly remembered something written near the bottom. The ranch deed is hidden beneath the chapel stone. Her eyes widened. Jacob looked at her. What is it? I know where the deed is. Victor wanted those papers because they proved ownership of Thomas Walker's land and exposed the illegal scheme to steal it. Jacob smiled despite the danger. Then we protect them. Just as another bullet shattered the front window, the sound of distant hoofbeats echoed through the valley. More riders, dozens of them. Victor looked toward the ridge. What? A familiar voice thundered across the darkness. Silver Creek Ranch. It was Sheriff Brooks. Behind him rode nearly 20 deputies and neighboring ranchers carrying rifles. Victor cursed. Retreat. The outlaws turned their horses and disappeared into the darkness before the sheriff's men surrounded the ranch. As silence slowly returned, Sheriff Brooks dismounted. Is everyone alive? Jacob nodded. We're fine. The sheriff looked toward Clara. Looks like they were after more than money. She held Thomas's letter close to her heart. They wanted the truth. Jacob stood beside her. And now ... They're afraid she find it. Clara looked at Jacob, realizing he had risked everything to protect someone he had known only a few days. For the first time since arriving in Montana, she no longer felt completely alone. And though neither of them spoke the words aloud, something far stronger than gratitude had begun to grow between them. Yet both knew the greatest battle still lay ahead. Victor Harlan had escaped, and he would never stop until every secret buried beneath Silver Creek was his. A week after the attack on Silver Creek Ranch, the peaceful valley looked calm once again. But everyone knew the danger had not passed. Sheriff Daniel Brooks had doubled the patrols around the ranch, while Jacob Callahan quietly prepared for the final confrontation. Clara Bennett stood on the ranch porch each morning, watching the sunrise over the Montana mountains, grateful to be alive yet determined to uncover the truth about Thomas Walker's death. She had arrived believing she would begin a new life with one man, only to discover that fate had chosen a different path. Inside the ranch house, Jacob carefully unfolded the old ranch map and placed Thomas Walker's final letter beside it. "The chapel," he said quietly. Clara nodded. "That's where he hid the deed." Before sunrise the next morning, Jacob, Clara, and Sheriff Brooks rode toward the abandoned frontier chapel that stood on a lonely hill overlooking Silver Creek. Time had weathered its wooden walls, and the old bell no longer rang, but the little church remained a symbol of hope for the settlers who had built it years before. Jacob stepped inside and knelt beside the large stone beneath the wooden cross. With the sheriff's help, he lifted the heavy slab. Hidden beneath it was a small iron box wrapped in oilcloth. Clara held her breath. Jacob carefully opened the box. Inside lay the official deed to Thomas Walker's ranch, signed legal papers, and another sealed letter addressed to whoever finds this. Sheriff Brooks opened the letter and read aloud, "If I do not live to welcome Clara Bennett, let it be known that Victor Harlan has threatened me repeatedly. He wants my ranch because valuable railroad land will soon pass through these hills. If anything happens to me, Jacob Callahan knows the truth. Protect Clara. She came here believing in an honest man, and she deserves an honest future." Silence filled the chapel. Clara wiped tears from her eyes. "He was trying to save me." Jacob gently nodded. "He never stopped thinking about your future." Just then, the sound of galloping horses echoed outside. Victor Harlan and several armed riders surrounded the chapel. Victor laughed as he dismounted. "So you found the papers." Jacob stepped in front of Clara. "They're going to the sheriff." Victor slowly drew his revolver. "They're going nowhere." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Sheriff Brooks spoke firmly. "Victor Harlan, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Walker." Victor smiled coldly. "You can't prove anything." One of Victor's frightened riders suddenly lowered his rifle. "I can." Everyone turned. The young outlaw removed his hat. "I was there." Victor's face turned pale. The young man confessed that Victor had hired several gunmen to ambush Thomas weeks before Clara's train arrived. Thomas had refused to sell his ranch, so Victor arranged the murder and planned to steal the property. Before anyone discovered the truth, "You promised no one would get hurt," the outlaw said. Victor shouted angrily, "You fool!" Before Victor could raise his revolver, Sheriff Brooks and his deputies moved in. "Drop the gun." For a moment it seemed another gunfight would begin. Then Victor slowly lowered his weapon. The deputies handcuffed him as the remaining riders surrendered without resistance. The truth had finally won. Days later, the courthouse in Silver Creek was filled with ranchers, merchants, and townspeople eager to witness justice. Victor Harlan was found guilty of murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Thomas Walker's ranch was protected by law, and Clara officially inherited the property Thomas had intended to share with her. Although grateful, Clara knew managing two large ranches alone would be impossible. She walked quietly to the porch of Silver Creek Ranch where Jacob was repairing a fence. "I've been thinking," she said softly. Jacob smiled. "That's usually dangerous." She laughed for the first time in many days. "I don't want to leave." Jacob looked at her with surprise. "You don't?" She shook her head. "When I arrived at the station, I believed my future had disappeared." She looked into his eyes. "But you gave me hope when I had none." Jacob removed his hat. "There is something I've wanted to tell you." He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded an old letter. "It wasn't Thomas who asked me to meet your train." Clara looked confused. "Then why did you say you've been waiting for me?" Jacob smiled gently. "Because months before you arrived, Thomas told me all about the wonderful woman writing him letters. He said if anything ever happened to him, he prayed someone good would look after you." He paused before continuing. "When I saw you sitting alone on that station bench, I knew I couldn't walk away." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Jacob took one step closer. "I thought I was rescuing a stranger." He smiled warmly. "But somewhere along the way, you rescued me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The gentle Montana breeze moved through the tall grass surrounding the ranch. Finally, Jacob reached into his pocket once more. This time he removed a small velvet box. "Clara Bennett, I can't replace the dreams you lost, but if you'll allow me I'd like to build new ones with you." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks as she smiled. Yes, with all my heart. A few weeks later, the little white church overlooking Silver Creek was filled with friends, ranch hands, neighbors, and families from across the valley. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows as Clara walked down the aisle wearing a beautiful white Victorian wedding dress. Jacob waited at the altar, unable to hide his smile. Pastor Samuel spoke warmly. Today we celebrate not only love, but second chances. When they exchanged vows, the church filled with joyful applause. Outside, horses stood quietly beside decorated wagons, while children laughed across the green meadow. As the celebration continued, Clara looked toward the distant railway tracks where her journey had begun. She remembered arriving frightened, abandoned, and alone. Now she stood surrounded by people who loved her. Jacob gently took her hand. Ready to go home? She smiled. I already am. Together they rode across the golden Montana prairie towards Silver Creek Ranch, leaving behind sorrow and beginning a future built on faith, courage, and love. Sometimes life doesn't bring the person we expected. Sometimes it brings the person we truly needed. And on the day a lonely mail-order bride was left waiting at a station, she found the family and the forever love she never knew was waiting for her. If you enjoyed this Old West romance, please like this video, leave a comment sharing your favorite moment, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming cowboy stories, frontier adventures, and unforgettable Western romances every week. Your support helps keep these stories alive.